All right, my name is Brian Cohn. I'm a senior consultant with NorthPoint Digital. In tonight's talk, we're going to be talking about managing your sites the CHEEZburger way. For those of you that are not familiar with CHEEZburger, it's a popular social humor website, a collection of just random things online. But they do a lot of development, and I think they've been around since about 2007. And since then, they have a fairly large tech department, and they release their own plugins and ways of doing things. And so tonight, in particular, we're going to be discussing one of their plugins that they released about 5 or so years ago called Cheezcap, and that's what this is going to be about. All right, so for starters, the challenges of managing multiple websites. I'm sure the majority of people in here are web developers of some sort. As you know, the more websites you keep developing, you keep running into more problems. You have to keep managing them, which means there's a lot of code upkeep. And what that really comes down to is each website is going to keep needing more customizations. The more customizations there are, the more the code becomes different between the sites. This can cause a lot of time loss because you have to keep refamiliarizing yourself with each site's code base. So when you're jumping back and forth between sites, you might have just spent the last week on one website. Now you're going back to another website, and you have to completely refigure how you were doing something there because you haven't seen it in about a month. This can lead to you writing different code for each site, even though you're trying to achieve the same thing. The way you have one carousel working on one website might be different than you have one working on another. And obviously, this is detrimental to your workflow because it's going to take up more time and it's going to be more confusing. So this is where Cheezcap comes in. Cheezcap, it provides a simple interface in the admin for handling theme customizations. It's created by one configuration file in PHP, and it can contain groups of text inputs, text areas, balloons, and select dropdowns. The advantages of using it versus just the regular theme customizer in WordPress or something like the Gantry framework, if you're familiar with that, you're able to keep only the things you really need in there. It's not something that's bloated and you're going to have to relearn how to use it and then teach other people how to use it. It's a very simple interface just using text inputs. So the advantage with that is it's only as big as it needs to be without excess options. The same configuration can be used by many themes to manage many different websites without having to change the code on the back end. It allows for importing and exporting of input for ease of transferring settings between environments and for version control. And it's WordPress.com VIP approved, and if any of you are doing a development for that, you'll understand why it's important because they only allow a very select amount of plugins and themes to go in. I want to cover real quick here this part about allowing importing and exporting and why this is so important. Many of you are probably used to developing in a development environment, then maybe a staging environment, and then finally, at that point, you might take it to production, or maybe it's a really small website and you're just dealing with production, but you do development on your local computer. What this actually allows for is within the admin panel, after you have your input from editors or yourself, you can actually just export a text file and import it into the other environment without having to do any sort of deployments or using Git or sharing it. And again, an advantage there is you don't have to worry about code pushes and deadlines, depending on if you're working at a larger company. You might run into a problem where they're saying you can't push code after a certain time because they don't want any code changes going through, but what this allows for is it keeps everything on the editorial side. So that means you can go in at any point in the time, and because you can export it, that means you can also keep it in version control. So you don't have to deal with editors coming back saying, I don't know why it broke. You're able to actually go back and see what they did and say, well, because you broke it, and it's right here. So what you can really use this for is, and I'll show you the actual code examples and what it looks like in a second. You can use it for including CSS and JavaScript files and using the WordPress and queuing without hard coding them on the back end. You can create new sidebars on the fly without having to hard code them. And you can allow for those new sidebars to be included on a per page basis. And you can use it to set up something as simple as just Google Analytics user account code. So this is what it actually looks like once you have it set up. It's just a simple interface. Over here is in the menu. You just click on that, and this is what it's going to bring you to. And I'll show you how this is created. This is just a simple text input again. This is the config file that made that last admin screen that we were just looking at. As you can see, it's, again, very simple. You're just naming the name of the group analytics, like you just saw. The type of input, in this case, is just a text option. You know, the title that you want to be there, and a description. And here where it says text Google A code, this is the actual object name that you would be calling on if you wanted to get the value on the back end. So by just this one simple configuration file, you can keep adding on more tabs, more groups, and more inputs without having to go through and getting, again, another bloated system where you have too many functions and inputs. You might be on a website like, oh, I need one more text input just so we can output something in the footer on each site. They all want a logo down there now. You just put in one more text input, and now, again, it's not getting bloated. You're sticking to just what you have to have, and it works across all the websites. So in that case, where I was just showing you the Google Analytics code, down here, this is how you would call it. I think you're all familiar with Google Analytics and probably have seen the script more than a few times. We're setting the account. All we're doing is we're calling on that one object. Again, text Google A code, that was the name that I gave it in that configuration file. By outputting it here, again, this is how simple this is to use, and that's why it's still popular. Because between this, all you have to do is that configuration file and echo out, and you're done. So on the fly, somebody's coming to you saying that they need more examples, or they need more, basically just input from the admin side. It's very easy to do on the fly. Just keep adding in more inputs and giving them what they need and sharing across all of the websites. So now I'll show you what this can really do on the live site. I've made a very ugly website using this, so that at least demonstrates it. All right, so this is the part that I was just talking about where you can include in different CSS files from the admin without having to hard code anything. The way I was able to do this was, here we've created a text area where I'm allowing you to just put on each line a CSS file. And by doing it there on the back end, I have a function that's calling that in on a per line basis and will then include it. It's also set up this way so that you can include absolute URLs from third-party websites. Again, the advantage is there's no hard coding. After you've set this up, it's dynamic. You can share it across different websites without having to worry about version changes or having to push through any hard-coded changes. And I'll show you the code for this. There it is. Yeah. So what all this is doing is it's pulling in that input area and just trimming it here and doing it on a per line basis. So we're just exploding it by testing for each new line. And then within there, we're still using as you can see here, the WP register style and enqueue. So we're still using the native WordPress functions, which is key to make sure everything's continuing to work with anything else that you already have on your websites. But by doing this, as you can see here also, I'm allowing you to input the handle, version, and most importantly, dependencies. So the power of this is, looking at this site right now as a white background, and this is coming in from, I believe, yeah, the 1.css file. But because I'm allowing you to put in dependencies, that means even a file down here, 2.css, all right, so now by doing that, I've now made that a dependency of 1.css. Or put more simply, that's now going to get loaded before 1.css does, which in turn has now made this. I need to pull this up. That's why. So you can see there, just by adding that one line, I've now changed the order of the CSS files. And that's just a small example, but as you can see, by doing that and allowing the users to interact with it that way, it's keeping you from having to go back and hard coding these changes, where you might normally right now go into your functions file, and you have to keep listing out, which CSS file you're loading, JavaScript file, and then enqueuing them that way. Now you've already put it in the hands of the editorial team. Now, you might be balking at that, saying, well, you don't want the editorial team going in there and messing around with CSS files and JavaScript files, because the editorial team can be a real pain to work with, and they tend to mess up things. But this is where that import and export feature comes in real handy. So down here, you can see you can choose a file, and by choose file, they mean to choose another Cheezcap configuration file that you've exported out of here. And what this allows you to do then is you can actually, if you want to do it manually, after a change has gone in, you could export it, save it if you're using Git, commit it so that you have a version change. But if you want to take it to the next level, and I'll be including this in the code that I'll give you at the end on GitHub, you can hook into Cheezcap's functions and automate it so that whenever the editorial team comes in here and makes a change, it automatically is going to export and save and put it in your Git commit. So that means the editorial changes have now become a part of your version control, and you're not going to have any problems tracking down any changes they've made. So again, we've now streamlined the process of allowing people to come in here very quickly and easily, add in new CSS files, JavaScript files, and it's all just because it's one box and using Cheezcap. Before I continue, are there any questions? Are you all still with me?
So can you do different panels for different admin levels?
Yes, this allows for roles. You can do it on a role basis, so you can let it only to admins if you wanted to. And again, on the back end, you can even do it on a tab basis, and you only want to show some tab groups. Yeah, and you have that flexibility, which is important. Anyone else? Yep.
Will it minify and cap into much?
I mean, you could set that up on the back end. The Cheezcap plugin, it's literally just there for creating that admin interface for inputs. On the back end, then it's up to you what you want to do with those inputs. But so yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to set up some sort of automating deployment or minimizing. Anyone else? All right. So that's just one example of what you can utilize this for, and that keeps it pretty simple. And you can probably receive the power of that because it's in version control, and you're able to just do things without having to hard code into the back end, which is really important. Now, here's something else that I did, and at the end of this, I'm also going to show you the 3 different websites that I just put on WordPress.com VIP using this, and you'll see here in a second why that's also important. So what I've done here is I've created a text input box, and using this plus, I'll show you the function here. Yeah, add sidebars to widgets, just a function that I wrote. But what this is doing, it's pulling in any text that's entered in that box and creating in the WordPress admin. I can find it here. Left sidebar, right sidebar. And those are created on the fly by just adding them in the Cheezcap configuration. So by just coming in here, going to content, I go new sidebar, save. And right there, we already have a new sidebar. Again, this is all in the admin. There's no hard coding needed. And this allows the editorial team, if they need to create more sidebars. So instead of them saying, hey, we need like a new ad spot here, we need to be able to put a new image here of some dog or something, you give them the flexibility and the power so they they'll actually allow you to keep coding instead of going in and just making these changes constantly for them. But where this becomes more powerful is if you combine it with another plugin like the one I'm using is Field Manager. But you can use, well, I mean, you can even just hard code it yourself. But the idea being you're taking something like this, and then on your pages, go down here to sample page. So here, using that plugin, I just created the 2 inputs here for selecting a left and right sidebar. And as you can already see, the new sidebar is already added to it automatically on the back end. So again, there's no hard coding or changes going on the back end to allow you to do this, but you've already given the power to the actual admin to go in, create new sidebars, and then put those new sidebars with their own information in the page without you having to do anything, which is very helpful, and it helps bring down the amount of time they have to spend on these sorts of things. And now I'll show you why that actually works. Actually, I need to change that. Yeah. So by just selecting those two things there and then setting up in the widgets area, that's where this left sidebar and right sidebar is now coming in. And although these are just more simplistic examples, I think you're beginning to see why this is somewhat powerful, especially with the version control part of it from exporting the changes. You're now allowing whoever is going to make those admin changes, you're giving them control of defining the website without actually giving them control of the code. And so when you're doing something like a website on WordPress.com VIP, I'll show you what I ended up doing. These 3 sites are all running off the same theme, and I was able to do this by utilizing the Cheezcap plugin. So here you see this one has a carousel in the front. It's the Tesoro Gas Company. It's real exciting. Arco. And this website from the 80s. Now, all 3 of these are very different. They all have very different features, but they're all running these different features based on the Cheezcap configuration that I made. And from that, we have 3 completely different looking websites that are all using the exact same backend code. So now I'm able to run 3 websites as if I'm only running one. It's made the process much more simple. And again, if one website needs something updated where they're saying, for example, I think something I came across in this was they wanted to be able to customize the output next to the copyright date. So that was a very simple thing. I was able to go into the Cheezcap admin, add it in the configuration file for one more text input, and now all 3 sites are allowed to do it whether or not they want to. It's up to them. But again, it's one code base, very minimal changes that you're doing on the back end, but you're giving the power to all these websites to utilize it. Yeah. Now, it doesn't have to, you can run this on different websites without it actually running on a multi-site, because this is, again, it's just a theme.
Then at that point, you can't have one configuration for multiple sites. It has to be multi-site for it to work out.
No, I mean, the Cheezcap, admin interface, it's just something that you're basically just sharing the same inputs across the sites, so they can use it the same way. So it doesn't have to literally be running. I mean, if you were to base it upon maybe relative URLs, that might change if it's on a multi-site, because that might be using paths instead of subdomains. But that wouldn't be a good idea anyway. So, but for the most part, you can use it across multiple websites, whether it's multi-site or single site, and you just have a bunch of different websites running on single sites.
How does it access it if it's single sites? Is there where would you put the configuration?
Oh no, it's on a per site basis. You're going in to update its own Cheezcap admin. It's just you're not actually having to change on a per site basis what that admin panel is. So if you're hosting in something like Git or at some other third-party location, you make an update. You can just update it through the deployment to every single site. Or more easily, if you're running all your sites off of a multi-site, you only have to update it once, and they're all going to get it immediately. All right, so up here I put the links for the demo source code that I'm going to be uploading to GitHub after this. I've also put on here the link for the Cheezcap download and the Field Manager download. And combined, these are the 3 things I've used in order to create, well, I mean, those 2 links are what I've used to create the demo for tonight. And on GitHub, I'll be also putting on there an example of how you can automate the export and committing in your version control the differences that are made in Cheezcap. Are there any questions?
clearer, so maybe everyone, so the Cheezcap plugin allowed you to create that settings page where you put the sidebar. So that's the thing that's custom. What you did with the code, creating the sidebar, is additional functions that you wrote to create it, right? So if somebody wanted to hard code, like the Google Analytics thing was a perfect example, right? If they wanted to just put Google Analytics in there, they can use the Cheezcap plugin to just create a simple text box, and
then all the sites can use it from that point on.
all sites can use that from that and then behind and use that.
Exactly.
So that's really the power of Cheezcap, is it lets you create these custom settings pages very quickly,
and then on the back end, using reusable code, you're able to keep using it across every single site. Yep.
So if you were starting a network from scratch,
Uh-huh.
it would make more sense to just use a common theme, right? Instead of trying to use this plugin to...
Well, in this case, I'm actually using one theme for all the sites. It's just on top of them using one theme, you might want further customizations. You know, again, something like Google Analytics, each one's going to have its own UA code. So then the question is, do you want to use a whole plugin out there just to, put that in, or would you prefer to just use one simple text input? You don't have to worry about there being any bugs, and then all of a sudden each site can utilize it. So from that point, yeah, you are still just using one theme. It's just you're giving more options as to how you can use it.
This is, I was just actually looking for the plugin. It's not something I can just download within WordPress. Like I can't.
The Cheezcap, so on like WordPress.com VIP, they call it a plugin, and you basically include it as a plugin. But the way they have it set up on GitHub, you actually just include it in your theme. It's just another directory within your own theme. And all you're doing is then in your functions file, I'll show you what that looks like. You're just requiring that file once, and then you have access to the configuration.
And you're going to send those links out?
Yeah, this is all going to be posted on the site. And I also put the slides on SlideShare that you guys will be able to access. Let's see, what was I just looking for? Yeah, so like right here, all I'm doing is I'm requiring once the Cheezcap configuration file right here. Yep, it's actually this one here. And it's from that the admin's now created. Let's see. Anyone else? Yep.
How does the GitHub integration work? Is it sort of one repository per site, or how does that work?
For which part you mean, as far as with the plugin, or for the?
Just how does the plugin sort of interact with Git in order to, when you at the top of the talk, you talked about how if an admin makes a change and breaks something.
Oh, right. So that part, yeah, I'll be posting up that code. That's another customization I've made using the Cheezcap plugin. Yeah, so like I was saying, the Cheezcap plugin in of itself doesn't actually have functionality. It's just giving you the ability to write really easy inputs that you can then pull from. So it's still up to you on the back end how you want to utilize that. So, but what I have done is, because it does already have this built-in ability to export and import, I'm able to automate that so that when you save it, you're automatically then committing the changes. You can do it on GitHub, Bitbucket, or even just locally in your own Git repo. Yeah, and so yeah, they'll be on the link when you guys go to GitHub later after I upload it.
What changes the state to GitHub? It changes that place in the text box?
Sorry, what's up?
What's changed? What's committed to?
Oh, so the input is
The actual data.
the data.
So it's saved to the database and also saved to this config file.
Right, yeah, with my function, yeah. So on the save action, what it's going to do is it's going to take in that export that normally you would just export, in your browser, and it's going to automatically then commit it and push it up to whatever repo you want. And I'm sure everybody's a little frustrated with WordPress sometimes because of the detachment of the database from the actual code. It can be a little annoying because so much is actually handled in the database. But again, doing it this way, you're actually able to keep that in version control and keep your eye on it.
What theme are you using?
I just created my own thing for this.
Oh,
Yeah, I kind of based it a little bit off of the responsive theme, just so I could easily have some sidebar.
is it pretty flexible with different themes?
Oh yeah, so with you can include it in any theme. And it's completely up to you what kind of inputs you want to put in, what you're going to use them for in the back end. And then with what I've put in here, and with the committing feature that's automated, yeah, that's again going to work in any theme because this is all just stuff in the back end. It's not literally changing anything on the front end that you wouldn't want it to. Anyone else? Nope. All right. Yeah, so my information is going to be online along with all the links and you know, the repo on GitHub and you know, detailed instructions on how I put this together, and you know, I can easily just incorporate in your own website without having to sit there for a few hours trying to read what I wrote. All right, all done.